Hey, everybody, welcome to PVD Horror. I'm your host, Dave, and I am here to talk all about an upcoming film called Rabbit Trap, which will be hitting theaters on September 12th. And to discuss this film with me, I have writer and director Bryn Chainey here. And we're going to be digging all into this folk horror, psychological acid trip style horror film that's heavy on a sensory experience and just really messes with your mind, starring Dev Patel, Rosy McEwen, and Jade Crute. Hopefully, I said that one correctly.
I did.
But yeah, I'm so excited to dig into this. So, Bryn, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Dave. Uh, yeah, I'm excited. I told you just before we started recording, this is my first ever podcast interview. So thank you so much for inviting me
First of
on.
many.
And we'll
First
see.
of many.
I mean, if
Yeah.
this is an absolute disaster and I have a horrific experience, it'll be the last ever as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that'd be cool as well. You could give me a horrible time, and then I'll be your first. This will be my first and only podcast ever, which will be
I will try my best, but I don't know if I can succeed at that. We will see.
okay.
Let's talk a little bit about you. So, getting to know you a little bit. You seem like a very laid back guy, right? Is that a totally wrong reading? Maybe
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
how
I
would you
think
describe yourself?
late. No, I mean, I'm riddled with insecurities and anxieties and fear. I mean,
Yeah.
I make genre movies. These are not made by people who are absolutely at peace with the world as it is.
Yeah.
So no, but I do. I aspire to be kind and
Yes.
present and vulnerable. So
I
maybe that
think
comes
that's what I
across
was
as laid
picking
back.
up. I think that's what I was picking up because
Yeah.
I talk to people for a living. So when I talk to people, I look for qualities like feeling comfortable talking to someone. And as soon as you popped on, you started talking, I was like, this is someone who I feel comfortable talking with.
Oh,
So
that's
maybe
nice.
that was the wrong wordage. And yeah, watching this film, everything you described about insecurities, anxiety ridden, totally comes
Mm.
across in this film. Yeah, there's a
Good.
lot of these themes,
Yeah,
which is
it's really it's a it's a movie about the horror of having dealing with self-loathing or kind of undiagnosed self-loathing or something.
yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, it's very cool that you talk to people for a living. I mean, that's one of my I love talking to people one on one, but as soon
Yeah.
as there's two or three, four, it starts to break down completely for me. So
Well, I was going to save this for later, but I'll say it now. So, aside from doing this show,
mm,
I also am a therapist. So, literally sitting down, talking to people. And when I watched this film, I was like, holy shit, there's some themes in here that I've literally been talking about with people like on a daily basis and having these conversations over and over and hearing them reflect some of the things that I kind of picked up from the film. So, I definitely want to talk about that pretty soon.
I'd
But
love to. That's actually my
one,
dream. Making the movie, I thought this. I want to make a movie that therapists can recommend to their clients or to use as a shorthand because it does, yeah, really deal with. It does. It's a movie about doing the work,
yeah,
that
yeah,
therapists kind of.
absolutely.
So, but yeah, we can get into it at
So
your pace, your
so
rhythm.
you this is your debut film, but you've dabbled with shorts, music videos. What
Yes.
gave you the direction to say like, hey, I want to do this, big picture? I know time and money is always a constraint when you're making your debut film, but like, what
Mm.
gave you that like this it made helped you make that decision to move forward and say, I want to make a full length feature here?
I mean, that's been the goal since I was a teenager. It's just, it's. I mean, I went to film school straight out of high school. I did it in Australia, and graduated in 2006, and since then that's been the end goal. I love watching movies at the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been and I like the format of movies. I enjoy TV, and I love reading. I love books. But for me, the 90-minute theatrical experience was and is my favorite form of visual storytelling. So
Yeah.
that was also the goal. It's just taken me about 20 years to do it. I mean, it's really fucking hard to make a
Yeah.
feature film, and especially if I naturally write stories that involve some element of the supernatural or the preternatural or something that's a little requires some scale. whether it's locations or practical effects. So that's also meant that my career progression has been slow, because the short films I made along the way each required a bigger budget than most short films. So
Yeah.
I had to, it was also a long path to seek out funding. I was living in Europe while I made most of my short films, to seek out funding, go through the development process, make it. And, each short took a few years, and so across the 20 years of between now and film school, it was constant working towards this. I've had a couple of false starts making features as well. This is my third attempt to make a
Okay.
feature. So it wasn't like I just spontaneously went, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna make a feature now.
Right.
I'm gonna call my uncle, who's a producer." You're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's if you don't come from a background where you have access to people in the industry. I'm the first artist in my family, and I didn't grow up knowing any filmmakers, and I don't have a nest egg to sit on. Like, I've always had to have day jobs the whole way
Yeah.
through my career, so it's just been a slow burn.
Yeah.
Like
And
the
so
movie, frustratingly slow. Most people would walk out at some point. They'd go, "Fuck this! It's too slow," And most people
if they were
my
watching your
age,
life in a
yeah,
story, they would walk out at some
honestly, and
point.
actually, it's a real thing. Like, I mean, I'm 39 now, and most filmmakers just give up at some point, because if they don't, if they have to make a living along the way, and then they want a
Sure.
family or something, they're like, "I can't do it anymore." And those of us who are maybe have, because I don't have kids, and I've managed to keep my life very lightweight. Um, I've managed to persist, but that's a luxury in its own way, or madness or something. But
Yeah.
many people just give up because they have to, and it's just really hard.
That's the thing too. Like, there's also this idea that there's supposed to be a specific trajectory that our lives are supposed to take, or where there's these
Mm.
like definitive timelines we're supposed to be hitting benchmarkers along the way, but like so many of us don't. I'm
Yeah.
in the same boat. I'm only a few years older than you, and I don't
Mm.
have kids either, and my life looks a lot different than others my age maybe. And
Yes.
that's something you have to overcome at some point, is those feelings about that, and deciding, like, is the path I'm on, is that still the path I want to go on, or
Yeah.
do I need to take a turn here or something like that? And sticking with something, I think that's really inspiring, right? Because so many people would fall off that path, like you said, and say, F this, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
start a family or something like that,
Yeah. And yeah, totally. I've forgotten his name, but there's a therapist. He was on the Script Notes podcast with John August. He's a therapist who works specifically with screenwriters, and he was doing an interview, and he was asked, "What is the defining characteristic of filmmakers that see it through, like, quote unquote, make it, like, you get there eventually?" And he said it's their capacity to despair.
yeah,
I thought, well, fuck. Okay, yeah.
that's
It's not actually your talent or your capacity for hope or your self-belief or ambition. It's how much despair can you sit with and not be
mm,
crushed by it. And that's kind of
I
that's. I think I have a great capacity for despair.
and I think that can be true for most professions or paths, that the path there is challenging because it's not very fruitful, right? Like, it's a lot of small things you have to do in order to build up to that big thing,
Yeah,
versus like other careers where maybe there's these not to keep saying benchmarkers, but like these things that are a little bit larger. So with filmmaking, it feels like it's a very long, drawn out path, and there might not be a bunch of huge or large feats along the way. It might be a bunch of
correct.
small things that eventually build into this big thing.
Yeah, and it's a very ill-defined path. You don't really
Yeah,
see where you're meant to go. So I think what has always got me through is just the love of actually making a film. You know,
sure.
um, I mean, my absolute favorite thing is the moment when it's usually in pre-production, because production is kind of execute everything you've planned, and deal with the problems that reality is throwing at you. But in pre-production, when you're working with your creative team and your cast, there's a moment where your imaginations lock into each other, and you start riffing ideas and you start solving problems, and it feels transcendent. It really feels like a sacred thing is occurring, where you're in a flow state. and
Yeah.
and then I love seeing someone who I'm working with do the best work of their life, like for example, the designer on this film, she's called Lucy Red. She's a mad little Cornish witch. She's like 5 foot nothing, covered in piercings. She grew up in a kind of a traveler community, and now she's a production designer. And this movie, she said, it is her dream project. You know, it represents so many of her interests and her ideals and
Wow.
ideas about what it means to be a creative, strange woman, and what it means to be a creature of the earth, and to bring in ancient ideas of Britishness
Sure.
with modern one. Anyway, everything about it was suited for her, this production designer. And watching her
Wow.
flourish and just the joy and the obsession she put into it, that is the fuel that gets me through all the kind of lonely, hard times. Is
So not to spoil anything, but later in the film, like when they're in the home and we see some very interesting aesthetics in
yes,
the home,
we can say that
would that be
there's a
her work?
transformation.
There's a
Yeah,
transformation, yes. That was her
yes,
work. That is
yes, and
beautiful. That is
amazing work. I mean, when
absolutely.
she and they put, so yeah, without too many spoilers, but the house does transform at some point, and we did it all with real. I can explain a bit of it, like nature begins to reclaim the house. So
Yeah.
there is moss and algae and mushrooms and
Yeah.
vines, and most of it was all real stuff that we'd sourced from, forest, and a few things that we built. Um, but it was a very tight shoot, and the production design team had planned everything meticulously so they could go in and over a weekend transform the house like in 2 days. And when they did it, I came in on the morning, um, and Lucy and I just held hands and walked through every room. I could like see all the incredible details, and her and I just ended up like standing in the living room, holding each other and crying because it was just the most beautiful. I was inside the dream,
Yeah.
my dream that I'd
Yeah.
written, and then her dream of to be able to create something that was fully immersive and felt, and and so it was just that's an amazing privilege, and that's
I've had this thing recently where I've been thinking about, I forget what the word is, but there's some people who can't envision, like their imagination, like they don't see the vision of
yeah.
something, right?
I think it's aphantasia.
Yes, exactly. And I've been thinking about how much of a benefit that could be in some ways,
Yeah.
because if you can't see it in your head, you can't be disappointed when it comes out,
True,
right? Like,
true, true.
because that's the thing I've always struggled with is like I get
Mm,
a vision in my head, but then when I try to like put it out, like let's say I'm drawing or whatever it is, if I
yeah.
draw it and it doesn't look how it looks in my head, I'm very like upset, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I,
but you
I
had
see
it in
that
your
with
head.
visionaries. Well, in a
Yeah.
way, I don't have full fantasia either. Like I think it's a very broad spectrum. I have
Okay.
when I see things, I don't fully see things in my mind. I see glimpses, but I visualize things. All of our language is geared towards the visual senses because that's what, as creatures,
Yes.
we've evolved to
Yeah.
prioritize, right? And this movie is very much about. I tried to make a movie that was about living through sound. So what it means to
Right.
be a sound-driven person. I'm very interested in musicians and sound designers and
Mhm.
sound artists, and they just see the world differently. They don't see the world, they hear the world, and it's a much more intuitive way of doing it. It's less. I almost want to say like phallic, like vision, like as in you don't move through the world penetrating it. You let it come
Yeah.
into you, and um, so I don't fully see things really. I hear ideas and I can feel ideas, get a vague sense of it, and then when my team will bring me sketches or if there's anything visual, like I'll go to a location to look at it, feel it out. It's more like I'm checking if the feeling clicks into place. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah.
You go,
Yeah.
oh, that clicks, and um, that's my way of finalizing the vision, is checking
Okay.
what feels right, and it's not really not a fully visual sense.
Sure.
Blah blah blah.
I love that
Now
explanation.
we're in a therapy session.
No, I love that explanation because it gives a little sense to why you went the direction you did with this film, because like you said, it's very heavy on like audio processing and how people kind of experience the world. And in the beginning there's that quote where it's we enter the world through our eyes, we enter the world, but the world enters us through our ears.
Yeah.
And that was a really impactful, and that's early on in the film, but that was such an impactful statement because it really did start getting me to reflect on that. And that's such a big theme in this film too, is like how they, these two, the couple is experiencing the world. This is probably a great time for me, before we confuse all the watchers and listeners.
Mm.
I'm going to ask you to do this, a quick
Yeah.
synopsis of the film. And you already told me beforehand that like that's the hardest thing to do, which is why
Yeah.
I love this question, because it is so
Right.
challenging, and
Yeah.
everybody approaches it differently.
Okay. Yeah. The elevator pitch version is something I never, I'm rubbish at them. Yeah. So the movie it's set in 1973. It's about a married couple who are musicians, um, working with electronic music, and they've just relocated to the Welsh countryside for reasons we don't fully explain, but we sense it's clear that they're in a kind of a crossroads in their relationship. And the husband, who's called Darcy, he's really the assistant of his wife who makes the music, and Darcy goes out into nature to record sounds for her to work with. And then in classic kind of ghost story or cosmic horror tradition, he stumbles upon an ancient sound, or that is not meant to be heard by people. And when he records it, it begins. It's an encounter with the fairy realm. And when I say the fairy realm, I don't mean the kind of Tinkerbell kind of little winged little like children. It's the old Welsh goblin folk who are not seen but heard and felt. And anyway, these forces begin to manipulate the couple and enter their lives. Most made, and without spoiling things, but then there's also a child that shows up who's quite clearly kind of connected to these forces, and the child is very interested in like entering their lives and completing the family unit, and in doing so starts to shake out all the problems that they have.
I think you were going to say infiltrated. I think that's a good word to use. She was looking to infiltrate, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess I should also explain that it's also not a movie that explains itself in such clear terms. It's a movie that's about a couple who are experiencing forces that they don't fully understand, that are beyond rational understanding. And so it's not a movie that tries to rationalize those forces. It's a movie about, if you take it as an encounter with irrational, emotional, supernatural forces, and you let the movie do that to you as well, then I think it's a more pleasurable viewing experience.
Sure. You made reference, and maybe this was before we started recording, but it was about some viewers who maybe this film doesn't connect with, right? And I think that the reason that would happen is
maybe most
if you're looking
so
for a linear experience, if you're looking for a structure that has a beginning and has an end and everything's explained at some point, this is not going to be the film for you. If you're open to an experience and you're willing to interpret and think, this is a thinking man's film. Like this is for the thinking person. Like this is something.
I hope so. Or I mean, I do think that I didn't go out to make a movie that doesn't have a structure and doesn't have something you can follow. I think actually the movie does have a very clear kind of beginning, middle, end. There is an emotional arc. It's just the way we handle exposition is not a balance that has appealed to everyone so far. But I think we tried to make a movie that rewards repeat viewing and rewards conversation about it and reflection. It's like it is really the story of a couple in crisis and about the emotional work that particularly Darcy, the husband, is avoiding. And it's that journey and the way that the natural world, maybe the supernatural world, involves itself in those of us who need the work. The work, we're back in therapy speak, but when the work needs to be done and we as rational humans are avoiding it and pushing it away, saying, no, I don't want to inspect my secrets. I don't want to inspect the shadows. Nature will not abandon its children. She will come, in times of crisis, she will, come and grab us by the scruff of the neck and go, come on, let's do the work. And I think that's the role. I think that's the role of folklore and myth in our cultural kind of
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that. So, as far as from that aspect, with the
Mm,
role that folklore plays in society is
yeah,
sort of recorrecting
partly
or
because it's all built on. I mean, you're a therapist, so maybe you can explain it a bit better than me about kind of archetypes and like archetypal figures, whether they're kind of internal or external in our
yeah.
lives. I think myth and folklore deal in that realm, in the realm of the unconscious, and the realm
Mhm.
where it's universal across all times and cultures.
Yeah.
These figures that have persevered cultural change. There are some figures that like the old like guardian, what are they called? Boundary guardians, and kind of the old witch in the woods and the
Yeah.
wizard with the staff and the light. These are figures that have persevered through centuries, and I think it's because they grab at something deeper than specific times and places in our culture. They dig at something that's more fundamental and unconscious. So
Yeah.
I'm beginning to rant. Can you rationalize? Can you help me out here?
Well, I wanted to just point out so two cool things about this debut film of yours. One, its premiere at Sundance, and two, being under the label SpectreVision,
Yeah,
which it was founded by Elijah Wood and Daniel Noah, um, who I've also read are kind of some of the some influential figures for you, along with like
yeah.
David Lynch and a number of other individuals. Even Dev Patel, you had kind of mentioned as being someone who's influential to you. So
Mm.
I thought that was cool to fall under a label of names of people that have had influence of you. So talk to me
Sure.
about that experience of being under that label and being able to premiere at Sundance.
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, people who listen to podcasts will probably know SpecterVision from, I mean, they're one of the most interesting production companies in America, I think, particularly in the kind of weird fiction space. They made movies like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night,
Yeah.
Cooties,
Yeah.
The Greasy Strangler, which is bonkers, and
Love it.
um, love it,
Yeah.
and Mandy, House
Yeah.
Across Miles,
Yeah.
second film, which is an absolute masterpiece, and Color Out of Space, and so on. So when I started writing Rabbit Trap, I really set out to write my own favorite movie. I thought I'm going to write a movie that brings together my core interests or the very core of what it means, of what I like, which
Yeah.
is folklore and myth and electronic music, like earthy analog electronic music, and also doing work like having characters that have to process unconscious problems in their lives, and it's vulnerable. So, well, who is making vulnerable kind of horror movies with heart? Horror, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and when I saw Mandy, when it had a very limited screening in Sydney, which is where I was living at the time, where I started writing the script. It played for one night in one cinema, so I went there with my ex, who recommended we go, and it just looked like a Nick Cage bonkers kind of
Right.
like, oh, okay, whatever. That's a night out. And I sat there, and it absolutely floored me in its tapping into dream logic while being an absolute blast, and going to some really strange hypnotic places,
Hmm.
and not just hypnotic by being slow, but by really like there's a moment where a character literally hypnotizes another character, and I fell
Yeah.
asleep during that sequence, and I woke up a little bit after. I was like, oh, was I asleep? And my ex said, I think you actually had kind of a minor kind of panic sleep. I'm somebody when I get really, really nervous and anxious and
Sure.
overwhelmed, I sleep it off. I've been doing that since childhood. Um, and the movie hit something very core in me, um, that sent me to sleep as a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
So I had to watch the movie again. Um, anyway, I thought whoever made that movie, I think they're the people who would get what I'm trying to do. Um, so they were the people I targeted. And I think I told you, yeah, as I said earlier in the interview, I didn't have any contacts really in the film industry. I'd made
Yeah.
some shorts, but I didn't have an agent, and I didn't really dealt with the professional world of filmmaking. I wasn't in America, so I didn't know people who made movies that played in cinemas. So it took about over a year actually, to get the project to SpecterVision. It was through a friend who had done some work with them in Portugal, who introduced me to someone else who works with them sometimes, and we very strategically found the right time for me to slip them a pitch deck of the project. And it was, and then I got a text like a few hours later from this friend screen grabbing what Elijah would have written back saying, "Holy fuck, this project looks amazing. Who is this guy?" And we got on a call a few weeks later, and then they were on board. They said, "We want to read a script."
Well, that's amazing.
And then I fell into a deep depression from the pressure and didn't write the script for months. And then they, as is the way, I spent a couple of years developing the treatment and a pitch, and then it was during the pandemic when they saw the deck and they loved it. And then a few months went by, and I heard again, oh, SpecterVision, they want to read the script before Christmas. They've got some time coming up. So then I had to pull myself out of the dark hole, and I wrote the script in a couple of weeks, the first draft, and then sent it to them. And then we're off to the races. And they've just been amazing. I mean, SpecterVision they're real ones. Like Elijah and Daniel and Lawrence Ingley, who joined the team while making Rabbit Trap. Those guys are real believers in what film can do, that you can make things that have healing qualities. We talked about it a lot, that we wanted to make a movie that was eerie and unsettling and plays with some genre, like some of the fun stuff that horror does, but ultimately to make a movie that makes choices that are about healing. And that's what we tried to do. Partly also, I think, some of the reactions have been kind of negative, because the movie doesn't go in the direction you expect, which is usually towards a cathartic explosion of vanquishing the malevolent force, which is usually in a horror movie. Instead, this is a movie that says, no, you need to absorb your shadow. You need to let it in. And so,
I truly found it the easiest and best way to experience this film was, like, at some point in the film, I kind of just figured out I got to lose my conventional expectations for a horror film. And that changed everything for how I was viewing it and made me just lose that idea that I should know what's coming next. I was curious. I wanted to know more, but I was just allowing the film to kind of play out and allow it to show me what you wanted to show me, basically. And I left after I finished screening it. I had a lot of questions, but I like that. That's the thing I love when I leave a film and I'm sitting there processing what I just watched and trying to make connections. And there were certain things I actually did a little digging to see some people's reviews to kind of see how they interpreted certain things. And then that's kind of when I realized well, that was an amazing experience for me. That's exactly what I want from a film. I want to leave the film being curious, wanting to hear more about it, wanting to think more about it. At least some films I'm fine with just leaving it, and it was a good experience. All right, cool. But films like this is kind of for me. So I appreciated that. And one of the things that comes up in this film, which I thought was absolutely bonkers, because I've been doing a lot of I did a deep dive recently on this theme, and I've been talking about it a ton. Shame. And how honestly crazy timing that I watched this film, and that's a heavy theme in the film. And I think that I read an interview that you did, and you said the quote, "Shame dies on exposure." And that was actually super helpful for me to hear you say that, because that is very true.
Truly. I mean, actually, that was a line that is a sentence that Rosy, who plays Daphne in the film.
Yes.
During the rehearsals that her, Dev, and I were doing, we were just reading through the script and just talking through all of it. She came in one morning and said that her therapist had said that to her, because she was in there discussing shame because of the movie, and the therapist had said, shame dies on exposure. We just sat with that for a while. That's a really concise way of putting it. I wrote a 2-hour surreal esoteric folklore movie to just say something, and she comes in with shame dies
4 words.
4 words. Shit. Because if I could say things more succinctly, I wouldn't have to make movies. But absolutely. And I think shame, I'm really convinced shame is the devil. Shame is the source of hatred, and not exclusively, but man, shame has done a number on us as a society.
It's we talk a lot in society about negative thoughts about ourselves, or like you said, self-loathing. Some people are familiar with the idea of like intrusive thoughts, and core beliefs are a thing that like we're teaching kids these days, which like that wasn't something that was ever taught to me when I was younger. And now that I'm able to teach other people, it makes so much sense. And I wish people had taught me that when I was younger, because it would have changed
Absolutely.
my
Yeah,
outlook
yeah.
of things. But even like in movies like Inside Out 2 is a perfect example, because that's all about core beliefs, how you see yourself, and when your actions don't match the way you see yourself and things like that. But shame, it can build these core beliefs about how we see ourselves, right? And how we perceive ourselves through other people, and how we see ourselves in the world. And with our main character, Dev's character, it really influences him in such a way that he feels, so they're like there's such a wall between them. He can't, there's just this thing that he just can't get over, he can't talk
Yeah,
about, right? And it just
yeah,
festers, and it becomes the thing that, much like we talked about that young person that enters their life and infiltrates them, his shame infiltrates their relationship
yeah.
and just creates this monster, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. And shame is the monster for sure. I think, yeah, in this film and in a lot of people's lives and relationships, totally.
you know
And
i think
I want to.
i think not enough people give it credit for, like, think about it enough of how
Correct.
much it probably impacts them on a day-to-day basis, the way they see
Because
themselves.
it's so internalized in our culture, particularly I think around men. Like, I mean, you said before, as a kid, you wish you'd been taught about core beliefs. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a kid that was some really bad stuff happening, in my childhood, and I didn't know how to process it. So it resulted in me being at times, quite a badly behaved kid. And I'd act out, or other times I'd go into like, at the time, I look back, I go, okay, I was depressed as a child, but actually I was just kind of scolded for being a mopey kid. Like, oh, why are you mopey? Like, don't be mopey. Get out and play some sport. That's
Yeah.
shame. That's actually just shaming someone for having troubles in their lives,
Right.
and uh, yeah, it's actually I don't know how much you've ever talked about the veil that's on this in this podcast as a horror podcast, but like different cultures talk about, and particularly in Celtic folklore, we talk about the veil. Like, witches will say the veil is thin tonight. You've heard that,
Yeah.
like in Macbeth. The veil is the kind of the the very thin boundary between the physical world and the unconscious or supernatural or sacred world, or whatever it is on the other side. And um, my little interpretation while writing this movie, because I was reflecting on that a lot, is that the veil is often, maybe not always, but is shame. That
Mm.
the thing that stops us from looking at the unconscious realm is the shame that we feel about what we might find there, and that what we have to expose in ourselves, or the pain that we're feeling, or the horrors that happen to us, and the effect it's had on us in our lives. Like, there's a lot of people joke about like how modern horror is all just thinly veiled metaphors for trauma, which I think is probably the case for almost every fiction piece ever written is actually just
Yeah.
a reflection on trauma. But um, I was less interested in trauma and more interested in the shame and the effect it has on someone over time and in
Yeah.
subtle ways. Because at no point does the characters talk about shame in Rabbit Trap, but you can. I'm glad that you picked up on it in the character of Darcy, that he's someone that's living under this blanket of shame, and supernatural forces want him out, want him to
Right.
just shake it out, and the only way to shake it out is to fucking shake. You got to shake the trees, and it doesn't feel good to shake, and that's most of the movie is shaking the trees so that the shame can come out.
Now, you like, nature is a big piece of this film, as is sound. And when I was looking through your short films, I know one of your short films, this was kind of, expanded on, right? This film,
Oh yeah, roughly. Yeah, kind of. It was like a jumping off point. Mm.
do you have themes of nature in a lot of your work?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah, kind of I mean, I mean, I'm a nature boy. I prefer being outside. Um, and I wrote this movie while doing a lot of walking in the woods. I was living in the countryside during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so the movie was really written in my head while walking my dog in ancient woodlands. And
Do you listen to music when you walk, or do you
yes,
just you do?
yeah, I do, yeah, yeah. And the kind of music in the film is the kind of music I listen to.
Do you
So it
listen to
was,
Animal Collective by any chance?
I did, religiously when it was, back in like the mid the 2000 to 2012 maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, that was
religiously.
the first band I thought of when I watched him recording the sounds in nature, because I
Oh yeah.
believe I can't remember which album it is. They had an album where it was like mostly sounds they had recorded out in nature.
Mm.
And I immediately thought of them, and I was like, this is such a cool way
Yeah,
to formulate music and experiment with different things.
yeah. I mean, yeah, bring sounds in, like, yeah.
They're
Um,
already there, they're there for our usage, right? It's, why not bring
yeah,
them in? And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, nature is across all my shorts, and like I'm still trying to
sure.
figure out why. But I think it's something to do with reconnecting with a part of us that's been lost. That's kind of, I think, at the core of it is that we've all
Yeah.
forgotten that we're actually creatures of nature, and that's part of the big problem. We're destroying the earth because we've forgotten that we're part of it and that we're custodians of it. Um, so, and I think horror, at least horror that deals with kind of natural forces, not slashers, but supernatural or eco horror, or they're uniquely equipped to remind the rational human modern the modern man that actually no, you're still a creature. You're
Yeah.
a creature made of the same stuff that the trees are made of,
Sure.
and you have come from mud and you will go to mud. And I think that's a really comforting or kind of challenging idea to me. It
Yeah.
remains terrifying.
So
We talk about,
that
yeah.
actually kind of leads into my next question, because something that I've recently started to think about more and more is, when I talk to filmmakers, I want to ask them this question. So I want to
Mm.
ask you right now, like, what makes you scared? Like, what are your fear that, and like, how do you portray that in your work? Like this film, I think you just answered that question slightly with like that idea of nature, and
Mm.
but like, is there more to the things that give you fear?
Yeah. Um, I think there are two. Okay. Oof. I always have to kind of stop before I answer a question because my instinct is always to give you the most kind of personal, like,
Yeah.
put it on the table. But I realize this is not a therapy session. This is going to be listened to
I mean, you can make it
strictly.
whatever you
But I
want to
also want
make
to be
it. You're
generous.
fine.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Um, when I sat down to begin writing this film, I asked myself. I do a lot of journaling. I write either writing by hand or on the computer, but I talk to myself on the computer. Like, okay, so where are you at? What do you want to do? And I'll ask myself questions as if I'm my own therapist. And I ask, okay, well, what are you most afraid of? Because this is the question I thought should be at the core of any horror film. If I make something that's scary to me, it will scare some other people because I'm not an alien.
Yeah.
I'm similar to some people out there. Um, and at the time when I started writing it, I clocked that I was very afraid of having my own family. And I asked myself, why is that? And in the process of writing the movie, it took me further in to realize, well, I'm not actually afraid of having a family. I'm afraid of not being worthy of having a family. Okay, I'm afraid of not being worthy of love. Why do I? And this took, I mean, this is months and months of like reflecting and writing and digging, peeling back the layers under the fear to find the kind of core fear at it. And eventually I landed on, oh, I feel unworthy of love. And
Yeah.
that's because of shame, actually.
Right.
And then writing the film was not a traditional way of writing in that you come up with a plot and then you figure out the best way to make the plot work. It was, how can I dig into this and express this question as a movie of why do I feel unworthy of love personally, and but also keeping it in a way that was potentially relatable to other people,
Mhm.
particularly men, who also have maybe had bad things from their childhood that have affected how they view themselves. Um, so I think that's the thing I was most afraid of, is the fear of being unworthy of love, and this is a movie kind of about that.
Or having to face yourself, right? Like sometimes we focus so much on others to
Mm.
avoid just having to look at our own shit.
Oh, totally, I mean, what's that joke? Like men would rather, you know, blah 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 instead of go to therapy. You know,
Right.
men would rather move to the countryside, record a
Yep.
supernatural sound, concoct a potentially supernatural child who infiltrates their family, blah blah blah, rather than go to therapy.
Yeah.
You know? So
And like, obviously this is in this film, we're seeing it demonstrated from the male perspective. And what I've learned is actually that it's pretty universal. I think about this female that I work with who stays in this terrible, terrible relationship that's not giving her anything. And it's like, why? And she eventually came to the conclusion, because I know if that I'm not in that relationship, one day I'm gonna have to look in the mirror and I'm gonna have to see myself. And that was like, damn, like that's I relate. Like we
yeah,
all can relate to that, I think. Like once we're removed of our outside relationships, we have to eventually look at ourselves, and that
yeah,
can be a scary thing to do.
yeah.
And that is the
It's also
monster, I
not
guess, right?
yeah, it's also not fixed. I mean, who you are, it will change. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, you think you've dealt with whatever the problem is at any given time in your heart, and then a couple of years go by, and you realize, oh shit, a new one has taken its place, or it's just evolved. You know, okay,
Right.
like it's never ending the work.
Yeah.
Um, it's a really astute observation you made because you asked the question what I'm afraid of. That since I was a kid, the the non-deep thing that I've always been afraid of is mirrors at nighttime. Scared the shit out of me. As a kid, I had to like my mum had to go around the house and like cover
Cover.
all the
Yeah.
mirrors with towels and clothes and things, and I couldn't even pass by like a window at night, you know. And I'm still kind of afraid of mirrors in the dark. I
Yeah.
would not go in the bathroom with the light off, which directly links to what you're saying. There's something about
Yeah.
seeing yourself maybe in the dark um, that is horrific. Because what if it's not your face looking back, or what if it's the face that you didn't realize you had,
Mm.
or you know, or just a ghoul, like you know.
Well, it's an interesting experience. I don't know if you've ever had this, but have you ever looked in a mirror and been and like for a second been like, is that what I look like? Like really? And like so, and that's you can do
You
that
get
in the
that with
daylight.
mirrors that flip horizontally, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes I'll look at myself and yeah, kind of feel like I almost feel like sometimes I've never seen myself. It's like you
wow,
look at yourself and you're like, wow, I never really noticed that about myself. And
that
that
is
can happen in the daylight. So imagine what that can look like at night, right? So that's
totally,
a very scary thing. I have the opposite. I'm afraid of windows at night. And that
yeah, totally.
idea that somebody could be like just
Oh,
staring
looking
at me
in.
and I don't even notice. Yeah, that's
Oh yeah,
scary to me.
yeah, that is scary. Yeah,
Um,
it's cool.
I love that the thing here that I love about this film and about this conversation is just the thing that we fear the most is sometimes ourselves, right? And it's not even just that
I think always. My take is that it's always
it's
something
always
internal
ourselves.
that we're afraid of. You know, we just
Yeah.
project our fears to the outside. You know, but go on.
It's not what we are afraid we're capable of. It's what we know we're capable of. We're
Mm,
all capable of good and bad, right? But sometimes we lose sight of that based on these negative thoughts we have about ourselves, right? And we're convinced that we're these certain things, or we can do these certain things that we don't want to do.
mm,
And we forget that we have the power of growth, we have the power of freedom of choice, and things like that. So this film starts to bring in some of those themes, and I really implore people who are interested in these themes to check this film out. I do think that there is so much value to watching this film on the basis of just its ability to provide insight to certain things, but also on a experimental level of just what you can do with film, like that use of sound. I thought to be so interesting, and it's something I don't really remember experiencing outside of like it took me to like a film class where we watched The Conversation with Gene Hackman.
yeah,
And
amazing.
like audio is so important in that film, right? And then that when I was watching this, I was like, audio is such a huge part of this. Now, let me just ask you this question and about that. Why was it so important to utilize audio along with like some of the themes we're talking about here? Are they intertwined, or is it two separate things that you just felt strongly about utilizing?
Probably both are true. Yeah, so like the way I write, at least the way I wrote this wasn't it wasn't it didn't always start with logic. It started with what feels right together, and
Hmm.
then me trying to figure that out and figure it out in a narrative way. So it always felt right to do a film about shame and yeah, like dealing with yeah feelings of shame and self-loathing and sound and nature. These three things felt really necessary, and then the process of writing it was me figuring out how and why that was true. And then the line from the film that you mentioned earlier, I think sums it up pretty well. Is that through your eyes you enter the world, through your ears the world enters you. And I think that's a really clear, and for me, a haunting depiction of how shame starts. Is that something is said to you or done to you, you encounter you experience something that enters you without your permission. You didn't invite it in, it invites itself in. Sound does that. Sound doesn't require you to look at it. It just creeps in. And I think that for me is the connecting point between shame and sound. And then also, separate to that, this is a film deeply rooted in Celtic folklore.
Yeah.
Almost all the details of the supernatural in the film are taken from reports of fairy sightings and encounters that I read into from the 19th century, mostly in Wales. And sound is a uniquely, well, it's not just unique to Wales, but it's so tied into Welsh fairy lore, is that they are musical beings, and they are beings you can hear sometimes and not see them. And it felt that was also kind of what's what I'm looking for? It was a kind of a clue for me that sound was important to this film. That
Yeah.
okay, well, the supernatural realm is often linked to sound. Why is that? Because it infiltrates on a deep level that doesn't require your rationality to engage with it. It just goes all the way in. And how music goes all the way in,
Yeah.
and your body
Yep.
responds, and you don't have to think about the music. It just makes you feel. And I think sound has that power, which is more ancient than language.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about the language; it's about the sound. So
Your first explanation about the connection with shame and the way it's like outside messages that enter us, right? And then they
yeah,
form the beliefs. And that was exactly kind of what I thought the connection was there. And it's cool to hear you kind of talk, expand on that with the folklore piece of it, because that's something that I kind of wasn't as familiar with.
yeah.
I love folklore, but I
Mm.
can't say I'm like an aficionado of
You don't
it.
need to
So
be, as in
yeah.
almost not very few. It's a very niche subject, like but
Yeah.
and also I didn't want to. There's a version of this movie where you have the two main characters. They have a great book collection, and then at some point they pull this book off the shelf, Welsh fairies, and they go, "Oh, fairies! They come into us through sound. What do we do?" Like where most horror
Yeah.
movies have this moment where the
Right.
characters discover what's going on and they explain it for the
Yeah.
benefit of the audience. And that's the moment in the movies I'm like, "Fuck off!" Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
fucking hate that moment. Unless
Especially
it's
when
gonna
you've already understood everything you just watched. Like that's when I can't
ideally,
stand
yeah,
it the most. I'm like,
yes.
you
Oh
really
yeah,
didn't need
totally.
to info dump on me. I'm
Please
not an
don't.
idiot.
Yeah, and there are
Yeah.
ways to do exposition, and I think every filmmaker is trying to be the most generous they can with the audience.
Yeah.
They think, okay, we've not done it enough earlier, so let's be kind and do an info dump.
Yes.
I get they're not doing it because they think the audience is stupid. They're trying to find the balance, and
Yeah.
all of us try to find the balance. For me, it was more important that because it's a disorientating, psychedelic, surreal journey for the characters, it should be that for the audience as well. And I was very piecemeal with the um, exposition, trying to put just enough so that the major turns
Yeah.
make sense, at least on repeat viewing. You clock, oh, okay. Darcy does at one point talk about sound being, like when you hear a sound, it now haunts your body forever. You're the house that the sound haunts. Or
Yeah.
the child does at times explain about how the fairies get into your house. There are little hints throughout it that repeat viewing, I think, will show that there is exposition littered throughout. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
And I know that you got to get going. you have other people to chat with. So I have to be mindful of that. But the one last thing I wanted to say was I thought it was cool. Like I said, after I watched the film, I wanted to see, other people's, theories about some of the things they were seeing. And I saw one person had mentioned that maybe Rose's character had Rosy's character had her own things that she was dealing with. And I was like, I was picking up on that, but I didn't put a lot of emphasis on it in my mind. And then I started to think more about that, and I was starting to connect some dots. So I thought it was cool that I was like, as a viewing experience, you're able to kind of like look at that. And I think it's a talking piece too. It's like a great film to be able to chat with people after and kind of see what their thoughts were and where the direction they went. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But Bryn, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. And as your first podcast, I got to ask you, how was the experience?
It was great. I mean, it's amazing coincidence, or just so serendipitous, that you're a therapist as well as a podcast host. So that you're excited about talking about the kind of psychological themes of the film. I was a bit nervous that I'd come on and you'd be like, so list your 10 favorite kills.
Well, that's going to be your next one. So
okay. Oh God, let's do that. So which was fun as well. I would just have to really have a good think about my 10 favorite kills, because I do love. I mean, I love horror films. I watch
and everyone that's listening is like, oh man, I wish he would have asked him those questions, probably. But hopefully they appreciate this conversation.
Anyone who really wants just that kind of topic probably has turned this interview off a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
This melancholy Englishman talk about shame. Like, that's not for me today. So, yeah, but no, it's been great. Thank you so much for being so engaged.
Absolutely.
Like really digging into it. That's what I hope people get out of it. And I hope it's actually it's not, the movie isn't an absolute downer. I hope it's actually a pleasure.
No, it's rather beautiful. It's interesting, and there's a lot of stuff to decipher and to think about throughout. So it's a very intriguing film, and I do hope people check it out. And I was notified that September 12th this will be hitting theaters. So looking forward to that.
In the US at least, yeah.
Okay, and I would recommend that people check it out in a theater, because I think that's going to be the best viewing experience as far as
the best listening
getting that
experience.
audio. Exactly.
The sound. I mean, we put so much love into the sound as well. I mean, the goal was to make the best sounding, I want to say horror film, because let's just say horror as shorthand, because but we wanted to make the best sounding horror film ever. I don't know if we achieved that, but I think we got pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah.
It's pretty psychedelic, the sound design, and immersive.
Absolutely.
So I've listened to it a couple of times in a cinema. Like I did the 2 Sundance screenings, and it was so great to hear all that work kind of infiltrating your body, and seeing people also, not to spoil it, but like the credits is the way we do sound design in our credits is different to most movies. We don't have a song at the end to break the tension. We have this kind of 7-minute long sound design piece that's meant to be a kind of a meditation. And on the second screening at Sundance, it was so cool to see all the audience clock that. It was a great crowd, and they started to lie back. I looked around, and everyone was lying back and closing their eyes.
Nice.
Oh, shit. I'll do that too. We all just lay back for 7 minutes and just let the sound design wash over us.
That is
amazing. It was such a beautiful way to end a movie experience, rather than like music hits, everyone gets up, let's go.
Yeah,
let's write a review.
Yeah,
like it's a 1 star. Instead, it was like, let's lie back and really reflect and just have a feel.
I love that.
For a while. So
that's awesome.
You don't get that at home. So I'm excited for anyone who gets to hear
absolutely
really good cinema.
Yes. So, all right, Rabbit Trap, September 12th. Go check it out in theaters, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for tuning in, and Bryn, thank you for joining. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
It takes a lot of love for a person to